Private James Chen stood at attention before the towering gates of Outpost Sigma-9, fighting to keep a stupid grin off his face. The expression came naturally now, after years of practice. It was the same look he'd worn when bullies underestimated him in high school, when drill sergeants dismissed him in basic training, and now as he prepared to enter the Galactic Defense Force's most elite training facility. The gates, designed to accommodate species 3 times human height, groaned open with theatrical slowness. James imagined some bureaucrat had programmed them that way for maximum dramatic effect, because apparently in space, everyone needed to compensate for something. Private Chen, a voice like gravel in a wood chipper, growled from above. "I am Commander ZK Rax." James looked up. And up. And a bit further up, until he finally met the 4 glowing eyes of his new commanding officer. The Nexarian stood nearly 15 feet tall, with iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Their species was renowned throughout the galaxy for their strength, which they never, ever shut up about. "Sir." "Yes, sir," James chirped, channeling his best golden retriever energy. He even bounced slightly on his toes for effect. One of ZK Rax's upper eyes twitched. "You are smaller than expected." "I get that a lot, sir. Mom says I'm just efficient-sized." A ripple of laughter echoed across the courtyard. James finally noticed the other recruits, a veritable zoo of the galaxy's most physically impressive species. A hulking Krevlock with arms thick as tree trunks. A serpentine Vassarian, whose muscles rippled beneath crystalline scales. Even a juggernaut, their silicon-based body practically carved from living stone. "Look," one of them rumbled in badly whispered galactic standard. "They sent us a snack." "Be nice," another replied. "It might make a good stress ball." James maintained his vacant smile, mentally cataloging each species' known weaknesses. The Krevlocks' limited joint mobility. The Vassarians' dependency on ambient heat. The juggernaut's sluggish reaction time. His fellow recruits had no idea that humans had spent the last 50 years compiling detailed files on every galactic species' vulnerabilities, just in case. Commander ZK Rax's massive hand descended, dropping a standard-issue equipment pack that landed with a thud at James's feet. "Your first test begins now, Private. Carry your gear to the barracks, without assistance." The pack was easily twice James's body weight. Standard protocol for new recruits, designed to humble them on arrival. James could already calculate the exact force needed to lift it while maintaining his facade of struggling. "Gosh, that sure looks heavy," he exclaimed, scratching his head. "Good thing I had lots of practice helping my little sister move her stuffed animal collection." The commander's face performed an interesting series of spasmodic movements that suggested he was either developing a migraine or seriously reconsidering his career choices, possibly both. With exaggerated effort, James bent down and grasped the pack's straps. He made a show of straining, letting out a few theatrical grunts for good measure. The other recruits didn't even try to hide their amusement now, placing bets in not-so-hushed tones on how long it would take the human to give up. James hoisted the pack with careful clumsiness, making sure to stumble slightly. "Wow, this is even heavier than that time I had to carry all the grocery bags in one trip. But Mom always says I'm stubborn as a mule, though I'm not really sure what a mule is, to be honest." He began his awkward trek toward the barracks, maintaining a running commentary about his mom's various sayings and his confusion about Earth idioms. Behind him, he could practically feel Commander ZK Rax's professional dignity crumbling into dust. Perfect. They were all buying it. Every stumble, every strained breath, every idiotic comment built upon their pre-existing assumptions about humans. Not one of them suspected that the struggle with the pack was carefully calibrated to burn exactly the number of calories James had calculated he could spare while maintaining peak combat readiness. Let them laugh. Let them dismiss him as another weak, chatty human who'd wash out within a week. James had learned long ago that being underestimated was the greatest tactical advantage a soldier could have. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was letting others believe exactly what they wanted to believe. He couldn't wait to see their faces when they found out what he could really do. "Combat training begins now." Commander ZK Rax's voice boomed across the training arena, a massive chamber with gravity generators that could simulate various planetary conditions. "Show me your species' superior fighting techniques." James stood in the corner, pretending to be fascinated by his own shoelaces while carefully observing his fellow recruits. The Krevlock, Grax, stepped forward first, his forearms flexing impressively. "Observe true strength," Grax bellowed, launching into a series of explosive movements that sent tremors through the deck plating. His massive fists whistled through the air in practiced combinations that could pulverize concrete. 3-second recovery time between combos. Limited peripheral vision. Over-reliance on upper body strength. James mentally noted, all while maintaining an expression of slack-jawed wonder. "Incredible," he gasped, bouncing on his toes like an excited puppy. "It's just like those action holovids my sister watches. Do you think you could sign my helmet?" Grax faltered mid-punch, his momentum disrupted by sheer confusion. Several other recruits snickered. Next came Sith, the Vassarian, demonstrating their species' legendary speed. Their crystalline scales flickered like diamonds as they moved through a blindingly fast kata, their body becoming almost liquid in its fluidity. Each signature spikes during rapid movement. Joint vulnerability at segment junctions. Techniques waste 40% of potential energy on unnecessary flourishes. James pretended to track the movement by spinning in circles until he dramatically fell over. So fast. I'm getting dizzy just watching. Do all Vassarians move like water, or are you just extra splashy? Sith's sails flushed a deep crimson. This is not meant to be splashy, this is ancient combat art. Oh, like interpretive dance? My aunt does that. The juggernaut Kronks stepped up next. Their silicon-based body moved with inevitable, crushing force through forms designed to maximize their natural armor. Each step left small craters in the training room floor. Load-bearing points exposed during forward momentum. Crystal matrix shows stress fractures under rapid directional changes. Primary sensory organs have 1.3-second lag time. James had pulled out a small notebook and appeared to be doodling pictures of cats. "Your turn," Human Commander ZK Rax rumbled, mandibles clicking in anticipation of entertainment. "Show us these combat skills Earth certified you with." James jumped up, somehow managing to trip over nothing. Right. Yes, I remember the first rule of fighting he adopted what appeared to be a stance inspired by bad kung fu holovids. Always maintain your center of something. Gravity? No, wait, that's a planet thing. He proceeded to demonstrate what looked like a cross between interpretive dance and someone trying to swat a bee. His limbs flailed in seemingly random directions while he made unnecessarily dramatic sound effects. Hawaii, yeah, whoosh, kapow. The other recruits were practically rolling with laughter now. Even Commander ZK Rax's professional demeanor cracked enough to reveal a smirk. "Is this some kind of joke?" Grax demanded between guffaws. "This is what passes for combat training on Earth." "Oh no, I probably got it wrong," James said cheerfully. "I was really distracted during training because there was this butterfly outside the window. Did you know butterflies can't fly in the rain? Or maybe that's penguins." What none of them noticed was how each of James's supposedly random movements had precisely mapped the training area's dimensions. How each stumble calculated angles of attack accounting for different species' height advantages. How each ridiculous pose tested the friction coefficient of the deck plating. His apparent clumsiness had built a complete tactical analysis of the combat space, all while convincing his fellow recruits he couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. "Perhaps we should move on to sparring practice," Commander ZK Rax suggested, trying to salvage some semblance of a training session. "Grax, since you're so amused, you can demonstrate proper technique against our enthusiastic human." But Sir James piped up, eyes wide with exaggerated concern. "Won't I need safety padding? And water breaks? And maybe a quick nap first?" "You'll survive," the commander growled. "Probably." As James stepped onto the sparring mat, still chattering about proper hydration and his mother's concerns about roughhousing, a nearly imperceptible change came over him. For just a fraction of a second, his stance shifted into perfect balance. His breathing synchronized with the room's ventilation system to mask any tells. His weight distributed optimally for exactly 37 potential counterattacks. Then he ruined it by pretending to tie his already tied shoes. The real show would come later. For now, he had a reputation for incompetence to maintain. The weapons qualification course looked like a cross between a military arsenal and a museum of galactic warfare. Racks of increasingly deadly hardware lined the walls, each designed for specific species' physical capabilities. James noticed with amusement that the human section contained nothing but basic pistols and rifles. "Behold," Commander Zk-Rax announced, "the pinnacle of military engineering." The massive weapon suspended from reinforced ceiling tracks could barely be called a cannon. It looked more like someone had weaponized a small starship engine. The gleaming black metal surface was etched with pulsing blue energy conduits, and the barrel alone was longer than James was tall. The Nexarian Siege Cannon, Zk-Rax continued, pride evident in his rumbling voice. 500 Earth kilos of pure destructive potential. The crown jewel of our arsenal. Neat, James chirped. It looks like a really angry vacuum cleaner. The commander's eye twitch was becoming more pronounced by the day. This weapon has never been successfully operated by any non-Nexarian species. The strength requirements alone. But what does it do? James interrupted, pulling out his notebook covered in doodles. Does it shoot rainbows? My sister loves rainbows. It fires concentrated plasma bolts capable of penetrating capital ship shields, Grax explained with exaggerated patience. One shot can disable a cruiser's primary systems. The other recruits took turns demonstrating their species' signature weapons first. The Krevlock hefted a massive hammer that crackled with electromagnetic energy. The Vassarian wielded a crystalline sword that hummed at frequencies that could shatter molecular bonds. The Juggernaut demonstrated a gravity gauntlet that could increase localized mass 100-fold. James watched each demonstration with exaggerated oohs and ahs while secretly calculating force vectors, power outputs, and structural weaknesses. He maintained a running commentary of increasingly ridiculous questions. Does the hammer have a squeaky toy sound effect option? Can the sword cut space spaghetti? Does the gauntlet work on bad jokes? Finally, Commander Zk-Rax approached the siege cannon. The massive Nexarian grasped the weapon's control grips and lifted it with practiced ease, the servo-assisted mounting arms detaching with a pneumatic hiss. "Observe," he commanded, turning toward the reinforced target range. The cannon hummed to life, energy conduits pulsing faster. A targeting reticle materialized in the air, projecting from the weapon's sophisticated guidance system. The shot, when it came, was less a plasma bolt and more a miniature sun. The target, a 3-foot-thick plate of battleship armor, didn't just develop a hole. It ceased to exist, along with several yards of reinforced wall behind it. "Impressive, isn't it?" Zk-Rax's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The weapon's neural interface is calibrated specifically for Nexarian brainwave patterns. Even if another species could lift it, they couldn't. "Can I try?" James bounced on his toes, hand raised like an eager schoolchild. "Please? I promise I'll be super careful. I won't even drop it more than twice." The entire room erupted in laughter. Even the commander chuckled, his usual disdain softened by genuine amusement. "Very well, Private Chen. Since you're so eager to embarrass yourself." James approached the cannon with the same enthusiasm he'd shown for everything else. He made a show of stretching, doing a few jumping jacks, and even attempted what appeared to be a yoga pose. "Ready," he announced cheerfully. Which end goes forward?" The watching recruits settled in for what promised to be the highlight of their training cycle. Bets were already being placed on whether the human would manage to lift the cannon an inch off its mounting, or if he'd simply fall over trying. The weapon's mass is distributed primarily toward the rear housing, Zk-Rax explained with patronizing thoroughness. The control grips are designed to. "Oh, you mean these?" James reached up and casually grabbed the handles. "They're kind of like the joysticks on my sister's gaming console, except bigger, and probably less sticky from spilled soda." Then, before anyone could process what was happening, he lifted the siege cannon clear of its mounting. With one hand. The other hand was busy taking notes in his ridiculous doodle-covered notebook. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the room's environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. James examined the weapon with genuine interest, absently spinning it like a baton while he studied the energy conduits. "The plasma containment matrix is pretty clever," he remarked, his voice suddenly free of its usual vapid cheer. "Though you could probably improve the efficiency by at least 15% with a reconfigured field geometry." He glanced up to find every alien in the room staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to horror to dawning existential dread. "Oh right," he grinned, and this time there was nothing stupid about it. "I probably should have mentioned that Earth has 3.2 times standard galactic gravity. Did that not come up during orientation?" Still holding the siege cannon in one hand, James casually walked to the maintenance bench. The weapon's weight should have been crushing him. Instead, he handled it like a child's toy. "The neural interface is interesting," he commented, fingers dancing over the control surfaces. "Though the synaptic calibration is a bit primitive. Mind if I take a look inside?" Before anyone could respond, his hands became a blur of precise movement. The cannon's outer casing seemed to dissolve under his touch, complex components detaching and arranging themselves in perfect order on the bench. Within seconds, the fearsome weapon had been reduced to its constituent parts, laid out with mechanical precision. "Fascinating," James murmured, examining the plasma core. "You're using crystalline matrix focusing, but the lattice structure is inefficient. Earth solved this problem decades ago." Commander ZK Rax found his voice first. "That's impossible. The maintenance sequence alone requires 12 hours and a team of specialized technicians." James reassembled the cannon even faster than he'd taken it apart, his movements precise and economical. "Yeah, that seemed a bit excessive. I figured out some shortcuts." The vacant smile was gone now, replaced by the sharp intelligence that had been lurking behind it all along. James's posture had changed to no more clumsy stumbling or excessive bouncing. He stood with perfect military bearing, the kind that comes from years of disciplined training. "You've been deceiving us," Grax accused, all four arms clenched in agitation, playing the fool. Obviously, James rolled his eyes. "Did you really think humanity survived first contact and earned a place in the Galactic Defense Force by being cheerful idiots?" He hefted the cannon again, this time demonstrating proper combat stances. His movements were fluid, precise, and utterly lethal. "We knew from the start that we'd be underestimated. Smaller, weaker looking, no natural weapons or armor. So we learned to use that assumption against potential threats." The targeting reticle sprang to life as James engaged the neural interface. "By the way, your brainwave calibration. Child's play to bypass. Human neural plasticity is off your charts. We can adapt to pretty much any system we encounter." But your behavior, Commander ZK Rax seemed to be having trouble reconciling the deadly efficient soldier before him with the bumbling recruit he'd been mocking. Was exactly what you expected to see. James's grin now held an edge of predatory satisfaction. Humans are culturally portrayed as the galaxy's comic relief, the plucky, primitive species that somehow stumbled into space. It's amazing what people will reveal when they think you're too stupid to understand. He turned to face his fellow recruits. "I know exactly how long it takes a Krevlock to recover between attack combinations. I've mapped every weak point in Vassarian crystal scale armor. I can predict a Juggernaut's movements 3 steps ahead due to their sensory lag." The aliens stared at him in growing horror as they realized the implications. Every clumsy stumble had been reconnaissance. Every idiotic question had probed for tactical information. Every moment of apparent incompetence had been carefully calculated to lower their guards. "But the real question," James continued, professionally pleasant now, "is whether you'd like to know what else humans have been concealing. For instance, that cannon's not actually that heavy by our standards. I've been lifting twice that in the gym since high school." He placed the weapon back on its mount with exaggerated gentleness. "So, shall we start training for real now? I'd love to show you some actual human combat techniques. Unless you'd prefer I go back to pretending I don't know which end of a sword to hold." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several alien species simultaneously reevaluating every interaction they'd ever had with a human. Commander ZK Rax looked like he was experiencing several existential crises at once. James just waited, standing at perfect attention, wearing an expression that suggested he was calculating exactly how many ways he could take down everyone in the room. The scary part was, he probably was. James paced before his assembled audience, the performative clumsiness entirely gone from his movements. Each step was measured, precise, like a predator sizing up its territory. "Let me tell you about Earth," he began. "Average surface gravity 9.8 meters per second squared. That's 3.2 times galactic standard. Our atmosphere? Denser than 80% of inhabited worlds. Our wildlife? So aggressive that even our herbivores routinely kill predators. He paused, letting that sink in. We evolved on a death world, but the galaxy sees us as cute pets. Know why? Because we let them. Commander ZK Rax's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The diplomatic reports, the trade negotiations, were exactly what you were meant to see. James smiled thinly. Humans bumbling through space, making friends, telling jokes, being harmlessly entertaining. Nobody questions why we adapt so quickly to every environment. Nobody wonders how we survive situations that should kill us. He picked up a standard-issue combat knife, testing its edge. Did you know human bones are, pound for pound, stronger than reinforced concrete? Our muscles generate force that would tear most species apart. We can survive radiation doses that would liquefy your organs. But our greatest strength. The knife blurred in his hands, dancing between his fingers in impossible patterns. Our greatest strength is being underestimated. It's amazing what people let slip around the funny little humans who couldn't possibly be a threat. Grax shifted uncomfortably. But surely your governments are fully aware. It's policy. Why demonstrate our full capabilities when being seen as harmless gives us such an advantage? James's expression turned serious. We're not hiding because we're weak. We're hiding because we're strong enough that if people knew the truth, they'd never stop being afraid of us. He glanced at each of his fellow recruits in turn. Every human you've met who seemed clumsy was choosing to appear clumsy. Every human who struggled with heavy equipment was calculating exactly how much to struggle to maintain the illusion. We're not naturally graceless, we're deliberately deceptive. But why reveal this now? Commander ZK Rax demanded. James's predatory grin returned. Because you're going to be our squad mates. And I'd rather have you watching my back knowing what I can really do than maintaining a facade that could get us all killed in combat. He shrugged. Plus, I was getting tired of pretending I couldn't aim. The aliens exchanged glances, decades of assumptions crumbling under this new revelation. Humans weren't lucky survivors, they were apex predators playing at being pets. So James concluded, should we start training properly? I've got some fascinating theories about combining Krevlock hammer techniques with Vassarian speed forms. Could be revolutionary. He paused, then added with a hint of his old grin, unless you'd prefer more jokes about butterflies. 2 weeks after the weapons trial incident, Outpost Sigma-9 had transformed in subtle but significant ways. The training arena, once filled with individual species showing off their unique combat styles, now hosted integrated practice sessions where different fighting techniques merged and evolved. The key, James explained to Grax, adjusting the Krevlocks stance slightly, is to use your secondary arms for momentum control rather than pure force. Like this. He demonstrated the movement, his human limbs flowing in a pattern that somehow made perfect sense when translated to a four-armed frame. Grax attempted the sequence, his eyes widening as he felt the difference. The power output is 30% higher, with half the energy expenditure. Exactly, James nodded approvingly. Your natural strength is impressive, but efficiency multiplies force. He glanced at the observing Commander ZK Rax with a hint of his old grin. Sometimes the smallest adjustments make the biggest impact. The commander had been watching these sessions with increasing interest. His initial shock at James's revelation had gradually transformed into scholarly fascination. Today, he finally voiced the question that had been bothering him. Were there signs? Looking back, should we have noticed? James considered this while helping Sith integrate some human martial arts flowing techniques into their crystalline blade work. Honestly, we weren't even that subtle. Humans survive things that should kill them, adapt to any environment, and learn faster than any species in known space. People just attributed it to luck, determination, or divine intervention, anything but the obvious conclusion that we might actually be extremely capable. And the cheerful behavior? The jokes. Oh, that's genuine enough, James laughed, the sound now carrying confident authority rather than forced vapidity. Humans really are social, friendly, and prone to horrible puns. We just selectively emphasize those traits when it's advantageous. Across the arena, the juggernaut Kronks was attempting to incorporate human-style rapid direction changes into their typically ponderous movement patterns. The result looked strange, but was undeniably more effective. The truly interesting thing, James continued, is how quickly other species adapt once they stop underestimating their own potential. Your traditional combat forms evolved under certain assumptions about physical limitations. Break those assumptions, and he gestured at the training floor, where alien recruits were discovering capabilities they never knew they had. Commander ZK Rax's mandibles clicked in. What James had learned was thoughtful amusement. And to think we believed we were teaching you. You were. Still, our James shrugged. Humans don't just hide our strengths, we collect knowledge. Every species has something to teach, if you're willing to learn. He paused, then added with a touch of his old mischievous expression, though maybe we could update some of your training manuals. The section on human capabilities is hilariously outdated. The commander actually laughed at that. I believe that can be arranged, Private Chen. Or should I say, Instructor Chen. Just James is fine, he turned back to his students, his bearing now a natural blend of the friendly human persona and the deadly capable warrior. After all, we're all here to learn from each other. Some of us just needed a little reminder not to judge by appearances. And if the other recruits noticed that James still occasionally made terrible jokes or tripped over nothing, they now recognized it for what it was: not weakness, but the confidence of a predator secure enough to play.